I came home early and caught my parents packing up my stuff, getting ready to move me into a tiny studio apartment. Meanwhile, my brother and his pregnant wife were set to move into my big house. "You don't need that much space," they laughed. So I picked up the phone and called the police. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when your entire world just shifts? Like one moment everything's normal, and the next, it's all upside down? Well, imagine walking through your front door after a successful work trip, only to find your entire life being systematically packed into cardboard boxes by the very people who are supposed to love and support you. That's exactly what happened to me, Katie, at 27 years old. It felt like a betrayal, a complete invasion, and a moment that irrevocably changed everything. My parents, Robert and Eleanor Parker, looked up, those familiar smiles plastered on their faces, the ones that always hid their need for control. My mom, Eleanor, held my childhood teddy bear in one hand and a lease agreement in the other. My dad, Robert, froze mid-tape, a flicker of guilt crossing his face before he quickly masked it. They were helping me move into a studio apartment I'd never even seen. If you've ever felt your independence slipping through your fingers, stick around. This is my story. For 5 years, I'd poured everything into my career in marketing. I graduated top of my class from Northwestern, landed a dream job at Meridian Partners, one of Chicago's most prestigious marketing firms. Late nights, weekends, whatever it took, I climbed that ladder. Just last month, all that hard work paid off. I was promoted to senior marketing specialist with my own team and client portfolio. I was thriving professionally. But my living situation? That was a different story. I was still in my parents' guest house on their huge suburban property in Northbrook, about 30 minutes outside Chicago. And no, it wasn't because I couldn't afford my own place. I absolutely could. It started as a temporary thing after college to pay off student loans, but somehow, 3 months turned into 5 years. I paid rent, insisted on it, actually, and tried to maintain as much independence as possible. The guest house had its own entrance, kitchen, and I handled all my own bills. My parents, though, they sold it as the perfect setup. Why waste money on rent when you could be saving for your future? Mom would always say, usually followed by, besides, we love having you close. My younger sister, Madison, she was smarter than me. The moment she graduated 2 years ago, she was out, into an apartment downtown with roommates. I totally envied her clean break, but we stayed super close. We texted daily, met for dinner at least once a week, always picking a spot halfway between us. Looking back, the signs of their controlling nature were always there, especially with my mom. In high school, she helped me apply to colleges by just eliminating any that were too far away. In college, she'd literally call my roommates to check if I was studying enough. Even now, she had opinions on everything, my hairstyle, my dating life. Dad? He was more laid back, but ultimately, he'd just defer to Mom, creating this impenetrable united front. About a month ago, I started casually mentioning looking for my own place during our Sunday family dinners. Nothing concrete, just browsing online listings, getting a feel for the market. I think it might be time for me to find something in the city, closer to work, I'd said. Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The commute's never bothered you before, she'd said. It's not terrible, I admitted, but I'm spending nearly 2 hours in the car every day. Plus, I'm almost 28. It might be nice to have my own space. You have your own space in the guest house, Dad pointed out, though his tone was gentler than Mom's. I know, and I appreciate it. I'm just starting to look around. No decisions yet. That seemed to satisfy them for a moment. But then Mom peppered me with questions throughout dessert. What neighborhoods? Did I know how dangerous some of those areas could be? Had I thought about maintenance issues in those old city buildings? Each question felt like a tiny hook, trying to snag my resolve, but I answered patiently, thinking I was just preparing them for my eventual move. Last week, I flew to Chicago for a huge client presentation. Technically, I worked at the firm's suburban office, but our biggest client was downtown. The presentation was scheduled for Thursday and Friday, but by Wednesday afternoon, we'd wrapped everything up. The client signed the contract on the spot, a massive win. My boss told me to take Thursday and Friday off as a reward. I decided to surprise my family by coming home early. Maybe we could celebrate with a nice dinner, and I could casually bring up that I'd been looking more seriously at apartments. I even had a showing scheduled for Saturday in a neighborhood I really liked. As I turned my car into our long driveway on Wednesday evening, I noticed an unfamiliar sedan parked behind my dad's SUV. It took me a moment to recognize it as my Aunt Sylvia's. Mom's older sister lived about 45 minutes away and rarely visited without advance planning for some special occasion. My first real indication that something was deeply wrong came when I spotted several large boxes stacked near the front door of the main house. They were labeled in my mother's neat handwriting, Katie's Kitchen and Katie's Books. A cold, heavy feeling settled in my stomach as I parked and walked toward the house, my wheeled suitcase bumping along behind me. Through the front window, I could see movement, people going back and forth, carrying things. I heard hushed voices from inside, my mother's rising occasionally to give directions. What I couldn't understand was why they were packing up my things, and why they were doing it now without telling me. I pushed open the front door, the familiar creak announcing my arrival before I could even say anything. The activity inside froze. My mother stood in the center of the living room, clipboard in hand, while my father and Aunt Sylvia hovered nearby with half-filled boxes. "Katie," Mom exclaimed, her surprise quickly morphing into an unconvincing smile. "You're home early." I stepped inside, taking in the scene. The guest room that had been mine since childhood whenever I stayed in the main house was completely dismantled. My bookshelves were empty, dresser drawers pulled out, framed photos packed away. Even more disturbing, there were boxes labeled with items from the guest house, my actual living space. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom beamed at me like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Oh, Katie, we found you the perfect apartment. Isn't that wonderful?" Dad at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Aunt Sylvia became intensely interested in folding a sweater that had already been folded. "You what?" I managed, still frozen in the doorway. Mom bustled over to the coffee table and picked up a stack of papers, thrusting them toward me triumphantly. "It's a darling studio in Oakbrook, just 5 minutes from Sylvia's place. We've already put down the deposit, and they're holding it for you to move in this weekend." I took the papers mechanically, staring at a lease agreement with my name typed in the tenant's space. A lease I had never seen before, let alone signed. Attached was a photo of a tiny studio apartment, maybe 500 square feet, with a kitchenette in one corner and barely enough room for a bed. "This weekend," I repeated, my brain struggling to catch up. "But I didn't ask you to find me an apartment." "Well, you mentioned wanting your own place," Dad said, finally speaking up. "Your mother thought it would be nice to help you get started." "Help me?" I looked around at the boxes, the dismantled room, the invasion of my space and privacy. By packing up all my things without asking me? By signing a lease for an apartment I'd never even seen? Mom waved away my concerns. "Oh, Katie, don't be dramatic. We know you've been busy with work. This way, everything's taken care of. The studio is perfect for a single young woman, and you'll be close to family. Sylvia can check in on you." The implications of that statement weren't lost on me. At 27 years old, with a successful career and living independently for years, my mother still thought I needed someone to check in on me. "I don't want to live in Oakbrook," I said, my voice growing firmer. "If I move, I want to be closer to downtown, near work." "Downtown?" Mom scoffed. "Those apartments are ridiculously overpriced, and the neighborhoods aren't safe. This studio is in a lovely, quiet area." "That's not your decision to make," I said, feeling anger rising to replace my shock. "I can choose where I want to live." "Katie," Mom said in that condescending tone I knew all too well. "We're just trying to help. You've been talking about moving out, but you haven't actually done anything about it." "I've been looking at places," I said. "I have a showing scheduled for Saturday." "Well, now you don't need it," she replied brightly. "Everything's arranged. The movers are coming Saturday morning. Sylvia and I have already measured for curtains." I walked further into the room, noticing with growing horror the extent of their invasion. On the dining table sat stacks of my personal items, photo albums, journals, even a box of letters from my college boyfriend that I'd kept in my bedside drawer. "How did you get all this stuff from the guest house?" I demanded, my voice rising. "That's my private space." Dad at least had the grace to look embarrassed. "Your mother thought it would be more efficient to start packing while you were away." "You went through my things?" "All of my things." The violation felt physical, like a punch to the stomach. "How did you even get in?" "We have keys," Catherine, Mom said, her tone suggesting I was being unreasonable. "It's our property, after all. I pay rent." I shot back. "I have tenant rights. You can't just enter whenever you want." "Don't be ridiculous," Mom dismissed. "We're family, not some landlord-tenant arrangement." I spotted my diary from last year among the items they packed. A journal where I'd written my most private thoughts, including frustrations about my parents' controlling behavior. The thought of my mother reading those pages made me feel physically ill. "Stop," I said firmly. "Stop packing. This ends now." "Katie," Mom began, her tone turning defensive. "After everything we've done for you." "Eleanor," Dad interrupted, putting a hand on her arm. "Maybe we should have discussed this with Katie first." "There's nothing to discuss," Mom insisted. "The deposit's paid. The lease is signed. This is happening." Aunt Sylvia, who had been silent until now, quietly set down the sweater she'd been pretending to fold. "I think I should give you all some space to talk," she murmured, but continued packing even as she said it. I moved to the table and picked up my journal, clutching it protectively. "Did you read this?" I asked Mom, my voice shaking. Her slight hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "How could you?" I whispered. "I needed to understand what you've been thinking," she justified. "You've been so secretive lately. Always on your computer, barely talking during Sunday dinners." The realization hit me like a wave. "My computer. Did you go through that too?" Another telling hesitation. "You did, didn't you? That's how you knew I was looking at apartments. You invaded my privacy completely." "I saw those awful downtown listings you were looking at," Mom admitted without a hint of remorse. "Ridiculously overpriced and in such questionable areas. I knew we had to step in before you made a terrible mistake." The depth of the violation was still sinking in. My parents hadn't just packed my things. They'd systematically invaded every private aspect of my life to maintain control over my decisions. How did you even know I'd be away until Friday? I asked suddenly. I never told you my exact schedule. Dad looked away, but Mom lifted her chin defiantly. I called your office as your emergency contact. That new assistant of yours was very helpful. You posed as me? I was aghast. That's completely inappropriate. It was necessary, Mom insisted. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had enough time to arrange everything. I looked at my father, hoping to find an ally, but he just shrugged helplessly. Your mother thought it would be a nice surprise, he offered weakly. The patterns of my entire life flashed before me. College applications mysteriously lost for schools more than 3 hours away. A scholarship opportunity my mother forgot to tell me about until after the deadline. Boyfriends subtly criticized until I began to doubt the relationships myself. Even my career choice had been influenced by their constant comments about the stability of marketing compared to my original interest in photography. I reached for my phone to call Madison, needing someone to talk to, only to be sent straight to voicemail. Perfect timing for her phone to be off. Catherine, Mom said, using my full name as she always did when laying down the law. I know you're upset, but you're overreacting. This is for your own good. My own good. I repeated incredulously. How is violating my privacy and making decisions about my life without my input for my own good? You're not thinking clearly about this, she continued. The studio is perfect for a single woman. You don't need all that space you were looking at downtown. That's not for you to decide. Well, someone needs to make sensible decisions here, she snapped, her facade of helpfulness finally cracking. You clearly aren't ready to make these choices on your own. The implication that at 27, with a successful career and independent life, I somehow wasn't capable of choosing my own apartment was the final straw. Put everything back, I demanded. No. I'm not moving into that studio. It's too late, Mom replied coldly. The deposit is non-refundable. That's your problem, not mine, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. I never asked you to do any of this. After all we've done for you, she began, her voice rising. This is the thanks we get? It was the beginning of a familiar script, one I'd heard throughout my life whenever I pushed back against their control, the guilt trip, the reminder of all I owed them, the implication that independence equaled ingratitude. But for the first time, I wasn't going to play my part. What exactly have you done for me that gives you the right to make my decisions? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like control, not love. Mom's eyes widened in shock. This wasn't how our arguments usually went. Typically, I'd get emotional, she'd remain cool and reasonable, and eventually, I'd give in to keep the peace. Control, she repeated incredulously. We've given you everything. A place to live, support for your career, I pay rent, I interrupted. I've been financially independent since graduation, and as for my career, you tried to talk me out of taking my current job because it wasn't the safe choice you wanted. We only want what's best for you, Dad interjected, trying to defuse the situation. No, I said firmly. You want what you think is best for me, which isn't the same thing. Mom's face hardened. This apartment is happening, Catherine. We've already given notice on the guest house. The words hit me like a physical blow. You what? We gave notice, she repeated. Your cousins Thomas and Amber need a place to stay while their house is being renovated. They're moving into the guest house next month. Without asking me? I was nearly shouting. That's my home. You can't just decide I'm moving out. It's our property, Mom said coldly. And it's time you had your own place anyway. The studio is perfect. It's half the size I need. I protested. And in Oakbrook? I'd be commuting an hour and a half each way to work. You could look for a job closer to home, Mom suggested, as if changing the career I'd built for 5 years was a simple matter. This is insane, I muttered, running my hands through my hair. Completely insane. I turned to my father, hoping for some support. Dad, you can't think this is okay. He looked uncomfortable but shrugged. Your mother has put a lot of thought into this, Katie. The studio really is nice, and the neighborhood is safe. That's not the point. I was struggling to make them understand. The point is that this is my life, my decision. I walked over to one of the open boxes and peered inside, then felt my heart drop. Where's my grandmother's jewelry box? It had been a special gift from my dad's mother before she passed away. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Mom? I prompted, a new fear taking hold. Where is it? Well, Mom began, not quite meeting my eyes. Since you weren't using it much, I thought Amber might appreciate having it. You gave away my grandmother's jewelry box? I was incredulous. Without asking me? You have so many things you never use, Mom justified. We thought it made sense to pass some items on to family who could use them. What else? I demanded, looking around frantically. What else did you give away? Neither of them answered immediately, which told me everything. The antique desk from the guest house? I asked, remembering the piece I'd refinished myself in college. Dad looked away. My photography equipment from college? Mom stiffened. You haven't used that in years. Thomas's daughter is interested in photography, so you just gave it away. I finished, my voice breaking. Do I own anything in your eyes, or is everything just yours to distribute as you see fit? Don't be dramatic, Mom snapped. They're just things. They're my things. I shouted, no longer caring about keeping my composure. Things that matter to me, that have meaning and memories attached. And Sylvia finally spoke up. Eleanor, maybe you should have asked Katie first. Stay out of this, Sylvia. Mom said sharply. This is between us and our daughter. I felt tears welling up but fought them back. This is beyond control, I said quietly. This is a complete disregard for me as a person. We're your parents. Mom insisted. Everything we do is because we love you. This isn't love, I replied. This is ownership. The room fell silent at that. Even my mother seemed momentarily stunned. Dad was the first to speak. Katie, that's not fair. Not fair. I laughed bitterly. You know what's not fair? Coming home to find my life being packed up without my permission. Having my privacy violated, finding out my home has been given away, and my possessions distributed to relatives. I moved toward the door, needing to escape before I completely broke down. Where are you going? Mom demanded. Away from here, I said simply. I can't be in this house right now. Catherine Elizabeth Parker. Don't you dare walk out that door. Mom called after me, using her full name ultimatum voice that had worked so well when I was 16. I paused at the threshold, turned, and looked her directly in the eyes. I'm 27 years old, Mom. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore. With that, I walked out, ignoring her calls behind me. I got into my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. Tears blurred my vision as I backed out of the driveway with no clear destination in mind. I ended up at Jefferson Park, a small green space about 15 minutes from my parents' house, where I used to come as a teenager when I needed space to think. Sitting on a bench by the small pond, I let the tears flow freely as the magnitude of what had happened washed over me. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls from both parents, which I ignored. After about 20 minutes, a text from Madison finally came through. What happened? Mom's freaking out. I didn't have the emotional energy to explain everything by a text, so I simply replied, parents packed up my stuff to move me without asking. Gave away my things. I left. Can I call you later? Her response was immediate. OMG, yes, call whenever. Are you okay? No, not even close. As the sun began to set over the park, I sat alone, feeling utterly betrayed by the people who were supposed to love me most in the world. The worst part wasn't the apartment or even the invasion of privacy. It was the devastating realization that my parents didn't see me as an autonomous adult capable of making my own decisions. In their eyes, I was still a child to be managed and directed. The thought was soul-crushing. As twilight settled over the park, the full weight of what had happened crashed down on me. My parents hadn't just overstepped. They had systematically dismantled my life without my consent. The guest house wasn't just a place I stayed, it was my home. I had built a life there, created a space that was entirely mine, and now it was being handed over to cousins I barely saw twice a year. I scrolled through my phone, looking at the missed calls from my parents, 10 from Mom, 3 from Dad. There were also several text messages ranging from angry demands to know where I was, to worried questions about my safety, culminating in guilt-inducing statements about how worried they were. The most recent text from Mom read, Catherine, this behavior is completely irresponsible. Your father and I are beside ourselves with worry. Come home immediately so we can discuss this like adults. The irony of her invoking adult behavior wasn't lost on me. With shaking hands, I opened my Photos app and scrolled through pictures of my space in the guest house. The bookshelves I'd arranged just so. The gallery wall of photographs I'd taken myself. The cozy reading nook by the window. All of it would be gone, packed away into a tiny studio apartment I'd never even seen. But it was worse than that. As I sat there, more devastating realizations kept hitting me. My mother hadn't just read my journal. She'd gone through my computer, my private correspondence, my personal documents. The violation felt visceral, like someone had reached inside me and rummaged through my most intimate thoughts. And they'd given away my things. Not just any things, but items with deep sentimental value. My grandmother's jewelry box had been one of my most treasured possessions. Inside were not just the few pieces of jewelry she'd left me, but letters she'd written, small mementos we'd shared, a pressed flower from the last time we'd walked in her garden together before she passed away. Did my mother even know those things were in there? Did she care? The antique desk I'd refinished had been a labor of love during a difficult time in college. I'd found it at a thrift store, completely falling apart, and spent an entire summer sanding, repairing, and restoring it. It represented a period when I'd felt most independent, most capable. And my photography equipment, the professional-grade camera and lenses I'd saved for during college, dreaming of possibly pursuing photography as more than a hobby someday. Equipment that represented a path not taken, but still cherished as a possibility. All of it given away without a second thought. A sob escaped me, startling a nearby duck. These weren't just possessions. They were pieces of my identity, tangible representations of who I was and what mattered to me, and my parents had distributed them like unwanted items at a garage sale. My phone buzzed again, another text, this time from Dad. Katie, please come home. Your mother is very upset. We need to talk about this. Of course, my mother was upset. Never mind that they had violated my privacy, given away my possessions, and tried to relocate me without my consent. The priority was still my mother's feelings. As darkness fell completely, a new text from Madison came through. Just talk to Mom. Holy expletive, Katie. Are you okay? Where are you? Do you need me to come get you? I texted back immediately. I'm at Jefferson Park. Just sitting here trying to process everything. Katie, stay there. I'm coming to get you. 20 minutes. For the first time since walking out of my parents' house, I felt a small measure of relief. While waiting for my sister, I tried to think rationally about my options. I couldn't go back to the guest house tonight. Not with my parents in that state. Not with everything so raw. A hotel was an option, but the thought of being alone in an anonymous room made the hollow feeling in my chest expand painfully. Madison arrived exactly 20 minutes later, her car pulling up next to mine in the now empty park lot. She rushed over and enveloped me in a tight hug before I could even stand up. I am so sorry, she whispered, holding me as I broke down again. Mom told me what happened, but I know her version is complete bullshit. When I finally pulled back, wiping at my tear-stained face, Madison led me to her car. You're staying with me tonight, she said firmly. No arguments. On the drive to her apartment, I told her everything. The apartment lease, the invasion of privacy, the redistributed possessions, the given-away guest house. Madison's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. They've always been controlling, but this is next level, she said. Did you know they've been planning this for months? I turned to her, shocked. Months? How do you know that? She winced. Mom mentioned at Easter that they were thinking of letting Thomas and Amber use the guest house for their renovation. I assumed they discussed it with you. Easter was 2 months ago, I said numbly. They've been planning to kick me out for 2 months without saying a word. I'm so sorry, Katie. I should have asked if you knew. We rode in silence for a few minutes before Madison spoke again. You know you can stay with me as long as you need, right? The couch pulls out, and it's actually pretty comfortable. Thanks, I said gratefully. I just need a few days to figure things out. But as we arrived at her small one-bedroom apartment, another horrible thought struck me. My work clothes, my laptop, everything I need is still at the house. Madison's expression hardened. We'll deal with that tomorrow. Right now, you need to rest. That night, lying on Madison's pull-out couch, sleep eluded me. My mind kept replaying every moment of the confrontation, every violation, every dismissal of my feelings and autonomy. By dawn, I'd come to a devastating conclusion. I couldn't continue having a relationship with my parents as it had been. Something fundamental had to change. The next morning, Madison called in sick to work to help me figure out my next steps. We sat at her tiny kitchen table, making lists of what I needed immediately versus what could wait. You need clothes, your work laptop, and essential documents, Madison said practically. Everything else can wait until you have a place to stay. I can't believe I have to find an apartment immediately, I said, the stress making my head pound. The housing market is so competitive right now. Madison hesitated. I've been thinking about that. My lease is up in 2 months. What if we looked for a 2-bedroom together? It would be tight until then, but we could make it work. The offer was tempting, but something inside me resisted. I think I need to do this on my own, I said slowly. I've been letting other people make decisions for me for too long. She nodded, understanding immediately. Then we find you your own place, but my offer stands if you change your mind. My phone buzzed with another text from Mom. Catherine, this has gone on long enough. Your father and I expect you home today. The movers are coming tomorrow morning for your things. This studio apartment is non-negotiable at this point. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, after everything, she was still trying to dictate terms. I showed Madison the text, and her eyes widened. Non-negotiable? Is she serious? Completely, I said grimly. That's how it's always been. Their way or nothing. And what happens if you just refuse to move into the studio? I considered the question. I guess they're stuck with a lease they can't use, but they've already given away the guest house, so I'd still be homeless. Madison squeezed my hand. Not homeless. You have me. As we sat there planning, my phone rang. It wasn't my parents this time, but Alicia Ramirez, a colleague from work who had become a good friend over the last year. Katie, she exclaimed when I answered. I've been trying to reach you. Congratulations on landing the Peterson account. The whole office is buzzing about it. The Peterson account. In all the chaos, I'd completely forgotten about my professional triumph. Thanks, Alicia, I said, trying to inject some enthusiasm into my voice. She paused. Are you okay? You sound strange. Before I could stop myself, the whole story came pouring out. Alicia listened without interrupting, making only occasional sounds of disbelief or outrage. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. You're coming to stay with me, she declared. I have a 2-bedroom apartment, and my roommate moved out last month. I've been looking for someone to take the 2nd bedroom anyway. Alicia, I can't impose. It's not imposing if I'm offering, she cut me off. The room is sitting empty. Rent would be reasonable. Whatever you were paying for the guest house is fine. No strings attached. Are you sure? I asked, hope rising for the first time since this nightmare began. Absolutely positive. And the best part? I live in River North, exactly the neighborhood. You were looking at for apartments. You'd be 15 minutes from the office. The offer was almost too good to be true. A room in a neighborhood I loved, with someone I trusted, available immediately. Can I think about it? I asked, needing to process this unexpected lifeline. Of course, Alicia said. The offer stands whenever you're ready. After hanging up, I looked at Madison, who had heard my side of the conversation. That sounds perfect, she said, smiling. And it would give you time to find your own place without pressure. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had options, real options that I could choose for myself. But first, I needed to face my parents and reclaim what was mine. As Madison and I sat in her apartment, strategizing, a strange calm settled over me. This crisis, as painful as it was, had brought something into crystal clear focus. The pattern of control had been present my entire life, and I had been enabling it. I remembered a conversation with my work mentor, Janet, several months earlier. We'd been discussing a difficult client, and I'd mentioned my tendency to give in to unreasonable demands to keep the peace. Setting boundaries isn't just about what you say no to, Janet had told me. It's about defining who you are and what you'll accept in your life. The hardest boundaries to set are with the people who don't believe you have the right to have any. At the time, I thought she was just talking about client relationships. Now, I realized how profoundly her words applied to my family situation. This is my breaking point, I said aloud to Madison. I can't keep living like this. Madison nodded, understanding immediately. What do you want to do? I'm going to take Alicia up on her offer, I decided. It's the perfect solution for now. But first, I need to get my essential belongings from the house. I'll come with you, Madison said firmly. You shouldn't face them alone. I shook my head. I need to do this myself. But would you mind being my backup? Maybe waiting in the car. Absolutely, she agreed. And I'm calling Alicia to join us. The more support you have, the better. Alicia readily agreed to meet us at my parents' house. Safety in numbers, she said. Plus, I have an SUV with plenty of space for your things. Before leaving, I took some time to prepare myself mentally. This confrontation would be different from any I'd had with my parents before. I wouldn't be emotional, defensive, or seeking their approval. I would be clear, firm, and focused on my own needs. I also took practical steps to protect myself. I called my bank to ensure my parents weren't listed on any of my accounts and couldn't access my finances. I emailed my boss explaining I needed emergency personal leave for Friday, promising to be back Monday with a completed Peterson presentation. I even made an appointment with a therapist Alicia had recommended, recognizing I would need professional help to process this family trauma. By mid-afternoon, we were ready. Madison drove us to the familiar suburban street where I'd grown up, parking across from the house. Alicia arrived minutes later, giving me a fierce hug before we approached the front door together. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell, a symbolic act, as I still had my key, but I wanted to establish from the start that this was no longer my home. Mom opened the door, her expression morphing from hope to weariness when she saw Madison and Alicia flanking me. Catherine, she said stiffly, finally decided to come home. I see, and you've brought friends. Support, I corrected. May we come in? I need to collect some of my belongings. She stepped aside reluctantly. Dad appeared from the kitchen, looking both relieved and apprehensive. Katie, he said, moving toward me for a hug that I suddenly stepped away from. We've been so worried. I let you know I was safe, I said evenly. I stayed with Madison last night. The living room still contained stacks of boxes with my possessions, though fewer than yesterday. I noticed several were now missing. Where are the rest of my things? I asked. Mom lifted her chin. We continued packing while you were having your episode. Some boxes are already at the studio. The casual dismissal of my legitimate distress as an episode might have derailed me in the past, but today I refuse to be sidetracked. I'm not moving into the studio, I said clearly. I found my own place. Don't be ridiculous, Mom scoffed. The lease is signed. The deposit is paid. It's a done deal. Not by me, I pointed out. I never signed anything. Never agreed to this arrangement. Whatever financial commitments you've made are yours to deal with. Dad stepped forward, ever the mediator. Katie, be reasonable. Your mother has gone to a lot of trouble. That's exactly the problem. I interrupted, surprising him. This was never her decision to make. None of this was. Taking a deep breath, I delivered the speech I had been rehearsing all morning. For my entire life, you've made decisions for me without my input or consent. You've justified it as love, as protection, as knowing what's best for me. But real love means respecting someone's autonomy and their right to make their own choices, even choices you might not agree with. Mom opened her mouth to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. Yesterday, you crossed a line. You invaded my privacy, gave away my possessions, and tried to relocate me without my consent. That's not love or help. It's control, and I won't accept it anymore. The room fell silent. Madison stood by the door, her face a mixture of pride and concern. Alicia remained near me, a steady, supportive presence. I've accepted a room in Alicia's apartment in River North, I continued. It's my decision, and it's not up for debate. I'll be moving in today. River North. Mom sputtered. That neighborhood is my choice, I finished firmly. Just like my career is my choice. My possessions are mine to keep or give away, and my privacy is mine to protect. Dad looked at me with new eyes, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. Katie, I had no idea you felt this way. I've tried to tell you many times, I said, softening slightly. But you always deferred to Mom, and she always dismissed my feelings as overreactions or immaturity. Mom's face had turned stony. After everything we've done for you, she began, falling back on her standard refrain. I'm grateful for the good things you've done, I acknowledged, but those things don't give you the right to control my life. I'm 27 years old. I have a successful career, financial independence, and the ability to make my own decisions. Clearly not good decisions, Mom snapped. If you think moving to River North is sensible, that's for me to determine, I replied evenly. Not you. I turned to the boxes stacked around the room. I'm taking my essential items today. Clothes, work materials, important documents, and sentimental possessions. I'll arrange to get the rest later. And what about the studio apartment? Mom demanded. We're on the hook for that lease. As I said, that's your responsibility. You signed it, not me. For perhaps the first time in my life, I saw my mother speechless. Dad looked between us, clearly torn. Robert, Mom finally said, turning to him for support. Tell her she can't do this. Dad hesitated, then surprised us all. Actually, Eleanor, I think. She can. And maybe she should. Mom stared at him in shock. What are you saying? I'm saying we went too far, he admitted quietly. We shouldn't have gone through her things, signed a lease without her knowledge, or given away her possessions. If I had objected more strongly yesterday, maybe we wouldn't be here now. It was the closest my father had ever come to standing up to my mother, and the timing couldn't have been more crucial for me. Mom's face flushed with anger. This is absurd. We were helping her. No, Mom, I said gently. You were controlling me. There's a difference. With Madison and Alicia's help, I began methodically sorting through the boxes, taking only what truly mattered to me. Clothes for work, my laptop and work files, important documents like my birth certificate and passport, and the sentimental items that hadn't yet been given away. Mom alternated between angry outbursts, tearful guilt trips, and attempts to bargain. At least look at the studio before deciding, she pleaded. It really is lovely. That's not the point, I explained for what felt like the 100th time. The point is that you made this decision without me. Dad hovered uncomfortably, occasionally helping us carry boxes to Alicia's SUV. At one point, he pulled me aside. Katie, I want you to know I'm sorry, he said quietly. A real one. Not just the quick one I gave last week. I stopped sorting and gave him my full attention. I've always known your mother can be overwhelming, he continued. But I told myself it was just her way of showing love. I never stepped in when I should have. Never stood up for you when her control became unhealthy. Why not? I asked, not accusingly, but genuinely wanting to understand. He sighed heavily. Part of it was the path of least resistance. Your mother is a force of nature when she's set on something. But if I'm honest, I also failed to see how much it was hurting you. I thought you were like me, able to let her controlling tendencies roll off your back. It never rolled off my back, Dad, I said gently. I just got better at hiding how much it hurt. He nodded, looking genuinely pained. I see that now, and I'm trying to do better. I've suggested we both see a counselor to work on healthier relationships with you and Madison. This was so unexpected that I momentarily couldn't speak. Mom agreed to counseling? I finally managed. Not yet, he admitted. But I'm not giving up. Seeing you walk out last week, it was a wake-up call. I don't want to lose my daughter because we couldn't respect her as an adult. Impulsively, I hugged him. The first real contact we'd had since this whole ordeal began. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. By early afternoon, we had retrieved everything that mattered to me, including making a trip to the studio apartment to collect the few boxes that had been delivered there. I was surprised by how small and cramped the studio actually was, confirming my instinct that it would have been completely wrong for me. As we finished loading the last items into Paul's truck, Dad handed me a small wooden box I didn't recognize. What's this? I asked, opening it to find my grandmother's jewelry box inside, along with all its contents. I tracked it down from Amber, he explained. Told her there had been a misunderstanding. The desk and photography equipment are being returned, too. I can have them delivered to your new place when they arrive. Tears sprang to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered, clutching the box to my chest. As we prepared to leave, Dad asked hesitantly, would it be okay if I called you sometime? Just to check in. I'd like that, I said sincerely. Maybe we could have lunch next week. Just us. His face brightened. I'd like that very much. We had just finished loading the vehicles when another car pulled into the driveway. My mother emerged, her expression darkening as she took in the scene, the loaded vehicles, my friends, and me clearly in the process of removing my remaining possessions. What's going on here? She demanded, approaching rapidly. Robert, what have you allowed? Before Dad could respond, I stepped forward, keeping my voice calm and even. Hello, Mom. I came to collect the rest of my things. Without even calling first, she said indignantly. This is still our home, Catherine. I know, I acknowledged, and I appreciate Dad helping us today. She looked at the loaded vehicles, her expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been fear. So, this is really happening. You're really leaving. I already left last week, I reminded her gently. Today, I'm just collecting my belongings. She turned to Dad accusingly. And you helped her behind my back. Dad straightened his shoulders in a way I'd rarely seen. It's her property, Eleanor. She has every right to it. Mom's eyes widened at this uncharacteristic defiance. She turned back to me, her voice taking on the wounded tone I knew so well. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Sneaking in while I'm out, turning your father against me. In the past, this approach would have worked. I would have felt guilty, defensive, eager to smooth things over. But therapy, even just one session, had helped me see this dynamic more clearly. Mom, this isn't about repayment or taking sides, I said calmly. It's about me making my own decisions as an adult. I love you, but I need you to respect my boundaries. Boundaries, she repeated, as if it were a foreign word. We're your parents. Yes, you are. And I'll always be your daughter, but I'm also an adult with the right to make my own choices. She looked at me as if seeing a stranger. Perhaps in a way she was. The daughter she'd always been able to control was gone, replaced by someone who could stand firmly in her own power. We're leaving now, I said, gesturing to my friends who had been watching this exchange tensely. Dad has my new address if you'd like to send mail. And when you're ready to talk, really talk, without trying to control the outcome, I'd be happy to hear from you. With that, I walked to Madison's car and got in, watching through the window as Dad put his arm around Mom's rigid shoulders. As we drove away, I felt no triumph or vindication, only a mix of sadness and hope. The relationship wasn't over, but it was fundamentally changed. And that change, painful as it was, had been necessary for my own well-being. You okay? Madison asked as we merged onto the highway. I considered the question carefully. Not completely, I said honestly. But I will be. 1 month after moving into Alicia's apartment, I stood in my new room, marveling at the transformation. The space had become truly mine in a way my room in the guest house never had been. I'd painted one wall a bold teal color that Mom would have hated, hung art that spoke to me rather than matching the decor, and arranged my books by genre instead of size and color as Mom had always insisted. It looks amazing in here, Alicia commented, leaning against the door frame. I barely recognize it as the same room. Thanks for letting me make changes, I said gratefully. And for everything else. Living with Alicia had been a revelation. She respected my privacy, never entered my room without permission, and treated me as an equal partner in household decisions. These shouldn't have been remarkable things, but after a lifetime of subtle control, they felt revolutionary. Work had become a sanctuary, too. My success with the Peterson account had led to increased responsibilities and recognition. My boss, Janet, had been incredibly supportive when I briefly explained my family situation. Establishing healthy boundaries is one of the hardest things we do as adults, she told me, especially with parents who don't want those boundaries. I'm proud of you for taking that step. Perhaps the most transformative part of this month had been my weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Rivera. She helped me understand that my parents' controlling behavior wasn't really about me at all. It was about their own insecurities and inability to adapt to their children growing up. Your mother's identity has been wrapped up in being needed, Dr. Rivera explained. When you demonstrate independence, she experiences it as rejection. That doesn't make her behavior okay, but understanding it might help you respond more effectively. Dad and I had established a new routine of weekly lunch dates, just the two of us. At first, they'd been awkward, with Dad unsure how to relate to me outside the family dynamic. But gradually, we were building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than parental authority. Mom was struggling more with the new reality. She'd called several times, each conversation a mixture of guilt trips, passive-aggressive comments, and occasional genuine questions about my life. I maintained firm boundaries, ending calls when she became manipulative and expressing appreciation when she made efforts to respect my autonomy. Madison had become my strongest ally, visiting my new place often and helping me navigate the evolving family dynamics. Mom actually asked me yesterday what kind of apartment you have, she reported during one visit, not to criticize, but because she wants to send you a housewarming gift. Really? I was skeptical but hopeful. Really? I think seeing Dad stand up to her was a shock to her system. She's realizing she might lose both of us if she doesn't adjust. By the 3-month mark, I had found my own apartment, a 1-bedroom in the same neighborhood as Alicia's place. It was smaller than the guest house, but entirely mine. The day I signed the lease was one of the proudest moments of my life. Are you sure you don't want me to help with the deposit? Dad had offered when I told him about the apartment. I appreciate the offer, I'd said sincerely, but I need to do this on my own. He nodded, understanding in a way he might not have before. I'm proud of you, Katie. Really proud. Moving day arrived in early autumn. Alicia, Madison, Paul, and several other friends formed a volunteer moving crew, turning what could have been a stressful day into something joyful. As we carried the last box into my new place, my phone rang. Mom calling. Should I get that? Madison asked, seeing me hesitate. I took a deep breath. No, I've got it. Hello, Mom. I answered, stepping onto my small balcony for privacy. Catherine, she began formally, then softened. Katie, your father tells me today is moving day. That's right, I confirmed. We just finished bringing in the last of my things. A pause. Is it a nice place? The question seemed genuinely interested rather than judgmental. Yes, it is. 1 bedroom, good light, walking distance to work. Another pause. I'd like to see it sometime if that would be all right with you. The request, phrased as a request, not a demand, represented significant progress. I'd like that, I said cautiously. Maybe in a couple of weeks once I'm settled. That would be fine, she agreed, sounding almost relieved. I have something for you. A housewarming gift. Nothing big, just something I thought you might like. Thank you, Mom. That's thoughtful. We spoke for a few more minutes, the conversation less strained than any we'd had since the blow-up. As I hung up, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps with time and continued boundaries, we might build a healthier relationship. 6 months after the day I'd walked in on my parents packing my belongings, my life had transformed completely. My new apartment felt like home in a way no place ever had before. My career continued to flourish. I'd received another promotion and was now managing my own small team. I'd even started dating again on my own terms, seeing a kind architect named Ethan, whom I'd met through a work event. The holidays approached, bringing their own challenges and opportunities for growth. For the first time, I decided to host Thanksgiving in my apartment instead of automatically going to my parents' house. Are you sure? Madison asked when I proposed the idea. Your place is great, but it's not exactly designed for big family dinners. It'll be cozy, I insisted, and important for everyone to see this as my home, not just a temporary stopping place until I come to my senses and move back to the suburbs. To my surprise, Mom didn't resist the idea. We'll bring the pumpkin pies, she offered. Your father's making his special cranberry sauce, too. When Thanksgiving arrived, I felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement as I prepared my apartment. I'd bought a small dining table that just barely fit in my living area, supplemented with folding chairs borrowed from friends. The kitchen was tiny, but I'd carefully planned a menu I could manage in a limited space. When my parents arrived, Mom hovered at the threshold for a moment, taking in the space with curious eyes. It's lovely, Katie, she said finally, and I could tell she meant it. You've made it very much your own. The meal wasn't perfect. The turkey was slightly overdone, and we had to use the coffee table as a sideboard for extra dishes, but it was authentic in a way family gatherings had never been before. Dad told jokes, Madison brought her new boyfriend, and Mom actually asked questions about my life instead of offering unsolicited advice. As we finished dessert, Mom cleared her throat nervously. I have something to say, she announced, looking directly at me. I've been seeing a therapist at your father's suggestion. It's been enlightening. The table fell silent. This was unexpected. I'm beginning to understand that my need to control came from fear, she continued. Fear of you girls making mistakes. Fear of not being needed anymore. Fear of losing my purpose as a mother. She took a shaky breath. It doesn't excuse how I behaved, but I'm working on it. And I want to thank you, Katie, for having the courage to set boundaries that I should have respected all along. Tears sprang to my eyes as I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Thank you for telling me that, Mom. It means a lot. The road to healing wasn't straight or simple. There were still difficult moments, times when Mom slipped into old patterns or when I reacted with ingrained defensiveness, but there was progress, real progress, built on honest communication and mutual respect. As I reflect on the journey of these past 6 months, I'm struck by how a crisis that felt like the end of something important became the beginning of something better. The day I walked in to find my parents packing my belongings wasn't just about an apartment or possessions. It was about who had the right to make decisions about my life. I learned that being controlled isn't the same as being loved. That independence isn't just about where you live, but about having the freedom to make your own choices and sometimes your own mistakes. That family relationships can evolve and heal even after profound breaches of trust. Most importantly, I discovered a strength in myself I hadn't known existed. The courage to stand firm in my own truth, even when facing the people whose approval I'd sought my entire life. The journey isn't over. Healing rarely follows a neat timeline, and old patterns can resurface in moments of stress. But I face the future with a new sense of confidence and clarity. My life is my own now, my decisions made on my terms. My home a true reflection of who I am rather than who someone else thinks I should be. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can lose is the need for others' approval. And sometimes the most important boundaries aren't the ones we set with others, but the ones we set for ourselves, deciding what we will and won't accept in our lives, regardless of how much we love the people on the other side of those boundaries. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself when it mattered most? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories, and share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to claim their independence. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the hardest paths often lead to the most beautiful destinations.